Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Sadipi, the father of holoface. We put pattern before object. Phi is circular comparability, and only differences are public. Every claim declares type, scope, assumptions, and window. Claim, certificate, artifact, and pattern stay distinct. Local structure is read by lifts. A equals D phi tilde. Jets give finite signatures. Cadence, texture, flow are readable faces. Boundaries belong to identity. Stitching yields winding, holonomy, defects. Identity is lawful equivalence. Persistence is certified survival. Null is disciplined refusal. We built lawful change with interaction, provenance, stochastic branching, derived readouts, expressed physics, internal observers, trace making measurement, and memory that constrains what comes next. Part 35 Modeling. When a phi pattern builds an internal pattern of another pattern. We have been careful, step by step, to remove every magic shortcut while keeping the world intact. We did not deny objects. We resituated them as stabilized bundles of invariants. We did not deny observers. We naturalized them as patterns inside pattern reality. We did not treat measurement as passive looking. We defined it as lawful coupling that produces structured traces. We did not treat memory as a mysterious mental mist. We defined it as persistent trace structure that constrains future transformation. Now a new question arrives. How does any system go beyond what happened to what might happen? A trace tells us about an interaction that already occurred. A memory tells us that the trace did not vanish. But anticipation requires more than storage. Anticipation requires an internal structure that can be carried forward, used in new contexts, and applied to situations that are not yet present to the senses. That internal structure is a model. In our language, modeling happens when a phi pattern system builds and maintains an internal proxy pattern that tracks selected structure of another pattern, so that future states can be anticipated and future actions can be constrained. A model is not the thing. A model is a pattern that stands in for the thing. This sounds ordinary because modeling is everywhere. But the discipline here is strict. A model is not a ghost, not a floating representation with no body, and not an oracle. A model is itself a pattern. It has identity, persistence, scope, uncertainty, and provenance. It can be certified, refused, downgraded, corrected, and revoked. It lives inside the same law as everything else. The first story, walking home without looking. Imagine walking home at night. The street is dim. The eyes can see only a few meters ahead. Yet the body turns corners, avoids fences, and reaches the door. What makes this possible is not raw perception alone. What makes it possible is an internal map. The map is not the neighborhood. The map is an internal proxy, a structured pattern inside the nervous system that tracks selected invariants of the neighborhood, connections between streets, relative directions, a few landmarks, and the shape of the route. If the map were identical to the neighborhood, it would be useless. The mind cannot store every pebble and every leaf. The map compresses. It throws away most detail and keeps what matters for the task. When the body predicts after this corner the shop appears, that is not a miracle. That is the model constraining expectation. So in one everyday walk, we see the full structure. Trace and memory provide pieces of the past. Model organizes those pieces into a proxy pattern. Prediction uses the proxy to constrain the future. Model versus trace. Why a photo is not yet a model? A photograph is a trace. It is a record of a coupling between light and sensor. A folder full of photographs is a memory store. But a folder full of photographs is not yet a model. A model requires selection and structure. It must compress and organize traces into an internal pattern that can be applied again. A child can stare at many pictures of cats and still fail to predict how a living cat will jump. Another child forms a model. Cats crouch before they leap. Cats land on paws. Cats move silently. That model is not a pile of traces. It is an internal proxy that tracks certain invariants of cat behavior. So we must keep three things distinct. A trace is a record of an interaction. A model is a structured internal proxy built from traces and memory. A prediction is a forward constraint derived from a model. What exactly is a model in Phi Pattern terms? We define it plainly. A model is an internal pattern M inside a host system H that stands in a declared tracking relation to a target pattern T. We can pronounce this as M tracks T within declared scope S under window W with fidelity bound epsilon. Modeling is the activity of constructing, maintaining, and updating M so that the tracking relation remains certified. This definition forces several disciplines at once. The target must be named. Which pattern is being modeled? The proxy must be identified. What internal structure counts as the model? The scope must be declared. In what regimes is tracking expected to hold? The window must be declared. What access produced the traces that build the model? The fidelity must be bounded. How close is the tracking with what error? Without this, model becomes a vague word that hides smuggling. A second story, the blueprint and the building. Consider a blueprint of a house. The blueprint is paper and ink. The house is concrete, wood, wires, and air. The blueprint is not the house, yet builders rely on it to act. Why does it work? Because the blueprint tracks selected structure that matters for building: lengths, angles, connections, load paths. It ignores dust, paint texture, and the sound of footsteps. That is compression. The blueprint also has scope. It works for construction and repair, not for predicting the smell of cooking in the kitchen. The blueprint has identity. Version 1 and version 2 differ. A small change in a beam thickness can be the difference between safe and unsafe. So the blueprint must be identified and its provenance stored. And mismatch is not shame. If a beam arrives with the wrong length, mismatch diagnoses the failure. The plan was misread, the materials were cut wrong, or the design was flawed. So the blueprint story installs the central claim. Models are internal proxies. They enable anticipation. They live inside law. Mismatch is information. Why modeling matters? Anticipation is impossible without proxies. A system that has memory but no model is like a library with no catalog. Books exist, but retrieving the right one at the right time becomes luck. Even worse, applying the contents to an unseen future becomes guesswork. A model is a catalog, plus a compression scheme, plus a projection rule. It takes the past and turns it into a usable pattern. In physics, a model predicts a planet's position. In biology, a model predicts where food can be found. In society, a model predicts how a policy will affect prices. In a single person, a model predicts how a friend will react. In every case, the purpose is the same: reduce the space of possible futures into a smaller set of expected futures under declared uncertainty. The quality of a model: 5 dimensions we can certify. Because models are patterns, model quality can be discussed without mysticism. We can certify or refuse along clear axes. In model must track what matters, often the invariant generating core of the target. If the target has a stable identity bundle, the model must capture that bundle at least to the level needed for the task. We can say the model preserves invariance in variant 1, in variant 2, and in variant 3 under transformation family F within scope S. Predictive adequacy. A model is good if it supports correct anticipation. Predictive adequacy is not perfect accuracy. It is accuracy within a declared tolerance and within a declared window. We can say, predictions derived from M match observed traces within error bar delta for n trials. Compression. A model must simplify. Too much detail is not strength, it is noise. A perfect copy of the target is not a model, it is duplication. Compression is what makes a model portable and reusable. We can say M is a coarse-grained surrogate of T that retains chosen invariants while discarding features J. Fidelity and bounds. Fidelity is closeness, but it must be bounded. This model is accurate is not a certification. This model tracks T with maximum deviation epsilon under these tests is certifiable. Scope and regime. A model is never universal by default. Scope must be declared. A bicycle model works on a road, not on a lake. Newton works in everyday regimes, not at relativistic speeds. Scope is part of honesty. Examples across scales. One idea, many faces. Microscale, the lock and the key. A key is a physical model of a lock's internal pattern. The grooves of the key track the pins of the lock. The scope is narrow, one lock family. The fidelity must be high, a small mismatch fails. The prediction is simple. If grooves match, the lock opens. Biological scale, the immune system. An immune system builds internal proxies of threats. Antibodies and memory cells encode patterns of pathogens. This is modeling. Internal structure tracks external structure. Scope is pathogens encountered. Fidelity is enough to bind. Mismatch is no response or wrong response, and update is learning. Human scale, a recipe. A recipe is a model of a dish. It tracks essential invariants, ingredients, ratios, temperature, time, while ignoring irrelevant detail like the brand of spoon. The prediction is, follow the model, obtain a similar outcome. Mismatch teaches. Too much salt, too little heat, wrong timing. Planetary scale, navigation charts. A navigation chart models coastlines and hazards. It tracks geometry at declared scale. It ignores small stones not relevant to ships. Scope is declared by chart scale. Mismatch is fatal if scope is violated. Update happens when new surveys produce new traces. Cosmic scale, a star model. Astrophysics models a star's interior. No one opens a star. Instead, traces, light spectra, brightness changes, gravitational effects are used to build an internal proxy. The model tracks invariants like mass conservation and energy transport. It predicts lifetime and evolution. Mismatch is diagnostic. Maybe the model omits magnetic fields, rotation, or composition gradients. Models are themselves patterns. Identity, persistence, and provenance apply. A model is not only judged by how it tracks its target. A model is also judged as an object of certification itself. Identity. We must be able to say, this is the same model across time, or else predictions cannot be audited. Versioning is not bureaucracy. It is identity tracking for models. Persistence. A model must endure long enough to be used. A mental model that collapses under stress is a model with low persistence. A scientific model stored in a stable archive has high persistence. Finite windows. Models are born from windows. A microscope-based model sees small scales and may miss large-scale structure. A telescope-based model sees large scales and may miss micro details. So the window that produced the traces must be declared. Provenance. A model must carry lineage. Which traces built it, which transformations processed those traces, which assumptions were added, which parameters were chosen, which code produced the fit, which seed drove the pseudo-random steps. Without provenance, a model becomes a charm, trusted by habit, not by audit. Model mismatch, not a crisis, a protence. When mismatch appears, temptation says either deny the mismatch or deny reality. We do neither. Mismatch is lawful discrepancy between two patterns, the model proxy and the target pattern's traces. Mismatch can mean scope exceeded, the model left its regime, invariance wrong, the model preserved the wrong features, compression too aggressive, essential structure was discarded, new structure emerged, the target generated features the model did not include, windows shifted, the access regime changed. In every case, mismatch is information. It is a diagnostic that guides revision. A clock that loses minutes is a time model mismatch. The repair is calibration. A flat Earth chart failing on long voyages is mismatch. The repair is a spherical model. A medical model failing to predict a symptom is mismatch. The repair is further measurement, new variables, new constraints. So mismatch is not humiliation. Mismatch is the engine of refinement. Modeling is not ontology. The model is never the world. A central firewall must be explicit. No model is reality. Even the best model is a proxy under declared scope, window, and tolerance. Treating model as reality is the oldest intellectual mistake, confusing the map with the territory. This firewall is not anti-science, it is pro-science. It keeps theories flexible, revisable, and auditable. It prevents authority from freezing a model into dogma. The modeling gate. What a certifiable model claim must declare. Part 35 installs a gate with a simple purpose. Stop model talk from becoming lazy. Model target declaration. The target pattern T must be named. If a model of the economy is claimed, which economic variables, which region, which time horizon? Proxy declaration. The proxy pattern M must be identified. An equation set, a simulation, a rule list, a neural network, a mental schema, a recipe. Invariance declaration. Which features are tracked? Which invariants are intended to be preserved? In pronounceable form, M preserves invariant 1 and invariant 2 under transformations F. Compression declaration. What is thrown away? What resolution is used? What coarse graining choice is made? Fidelity bound. What error bound epsilon is claimed? Under which tests? With which uncertainty budget? Scope declaration. Where does the model hold and where does it fail? Scope is not optional. Mystery policy. How is mismatch detected, reported, and used? Denial is forbidden. Provenance link. Which traces, which pipelines, which parameter sets, which seeds, which tool chains produced M? If any of these are absent, the model claim is either incomplete or unsafe for public reliance. 12. Firewalls. What we refuse. We refuse the model is the thing. We refuse raw traces are already a model. We refuse a model works everywhere without scope. We refuse accuracy without bounds. We refuse hidden compression losses. We refuse mismatch denial. We refuse model claims without provenance. These refusals are not harsh, they are the price of public knowledge. The outputs of part 35, what we have installed. After this part, several capacities become available in a disciplined way. Modeling is installed as internal proxy construction inside pattern systems. Model quality has certifiable dimensions: invariant tracking, predictive adequacy, compression, fidelity, scope. Mismatch becomes lawful diagnostic information. Trace, model, and prediction are separated as distinct stages. A modeling gate now governs public claims that rely on models. And now the handoff becomes natural. With models installed, we can define prediction without smuggling. Prediction becomes forward constraint, using M to restrict expected future traces of T within declared uncertainty. That is the next part, part 36, prediction as forward constraint. How jets enter modeling. Why a model sees only finite depth. Earlier, we introduced jets, finite depth local signatures of a pattern. In pronounceable terms, the n jet of phi is j to the n of phi, meaning we read structure only up to a chosen order and stop. That discipline matters here, because every model is, in practice, a jet choice. A model never tracks the whole target. A model chooses a depth. Sometimes it keeps only the first few derivatives, sometimes only averages, sometimes only a few discrete features. This is not a flaw, it is the definition of modeling. The moment we say model, we also say finite read. Consider a roadmap. It keeps the graph of intersections and roads. It drops the texture of asphalt and the pattern of clouds. That is a jet choice. Keep connectivity, drop micro detail. Consider a medical blood test. It keeps a few numbers, glucose, hemoglobin, markers, and drops nearly everything else happening inside the body. That is also a jet choice. So when we certify a model, we must be honest about the chosen depth. Which features are tracked, which are intentionally ignored, and which might return as mismatch later. Uncertainty inside models. Models can be deterministic or stochastic. Because we already disciplined stochasticity, we can now place uncertainty inside modeling without letting it become an excuse. Some models are deterministic. Given input, output is fixed. A simple recipe is close to deterministic. A basic physics formula is deterministic within its regime. Other models are stochastic. Given input, the model outputs a distribution of possible outcomes. This is common when branching is unresolved or when access is finite. In pronounceable terms, we can say the model assigns a measure P over branches B, meaning P of B gives weights to possible continuations. A weather model is an obvious example. The atmosphere can branch and our access to initial conditions is limited. So the model is run many times with slightly different starting points. The output is not one future, but a family of futures. The model's claim is not rain will happen, but rain has probability P within these conditions. Here, the firewall matters. A stochastic model must still declare its branching structure, its measure rule, its seed policy when pseudo-random steps exist, and its calibration pathway. Otherwise, uncertainty becomes mystification. The third story, the app that learns our habits. Think of a phone keyboard that suggests the next word. It observes typing traces. Some traces persist as memory, a vocabulary list, common phrases. Then it builds a model, an internal proxy of language habits. The model is not language itself. It is a compressed pattern that tracks selected structure. Which words tend to follow which? We can test the model's predictive adequacy. How often does the suggestion match what is typed next? We can measure fidelity bounds. Top 3 suggestions contain the chosen word in 60% of cases. We can also see mismatch as information. When the model repeatedly suggests the wrong word, the mismatch reveals that the model scope is too narrow, or the context window is too small, or the training data is biased. Responsible models declare training sources, tracked invariance, scope, error bounds, and how updates occur in practice. Models and boundaries. Why every model has an edge. We learned that boundaries are part of identity. The same is true for models. A model's boundary is the line between what the model represents and what the model treats as outside. In a lab, the boundary might be the sample in the container. In economics, the boundary might be this country and this quarter. In personal life, the boundary might be this relationship under these norms. If the boundary shifts and we pretend it did not, mismatch explodes and we blame the wrong thing. So a modeling claim must include a boundary declaration. What is included, what is excluded, and what couplings are allowed across the edge. This is not paperwork. It is part of the model's identity. Modeling and control. Why proxies guide action? A model is not only for prediction. A model also guides intervention. When we steer a car, an internal model predicts how the car will respond to turning the wheel. When a doctor chooses a dose, a model predicts how the body will respond. When engineers design a bridge, a model predicts stress distribution. In pattern terms, intervention is a lawful transformation we attempt to apply. The model helps us choose which transformation family is likely to produce the desired next state. So modeling is the bridge between memory and action. But we must stay disciplined. An intervention guided by an uncertified model is a gamble disguised as science. The gate therefore demands that any control claim declares the model scope and uncertainty budget, and it declares what happens when mismatch appears. Safety lives in that honesty. Refusal and downgrades. How model claims fail gracefully. In our broader framework, failure is information. The same is true here. If a model claim cannot declare its target, tracked invariance, scope, or fidelity bounds, the correct output is not bluff. The correct output is refusal. Model claim not certifiable under current declarations. Sometimes the model can be downgraded. Instead of claiming this model predicts exact outcomes, we claim this model provides a coarse trend. Instead of this model is universal, we claim this model works in regime R only. Instead of epsilon is small, we claim epsilon is bounded above by a larger value. This is not weakness. This is the discipline that keeps public knowledge honest. The simple equation we can pronounce: model as tracking with error. We can summarize modeling in one pronounceable line. M of t under W approximates t within epsilon, meaning the proxy pattern M, built under window W, tracks the target pattern T with maximum mismatch bounded by epsilon within declared scope S. Nothing mystical is hidden. Everything is declared. If epsilon cannot be bounded, the claim is weakened or refused. Closing image, the shadow and the object. A hand moves in front of a lamp and casts a shadow on the wall. The shadow is not the hand, yet the shadow tracks the hand's shape in this disciplined sense. The lamp and wall create the window. The shadow is the proxy. If we forget the window, we make mistakes. A flat shadow cannot reveal depth. If we remember the window, the shadow becomes useful. It predicts motion, it signals presence, it enables coordination. Models are shadows in this disciplined sense, useful proxies produced under specific windows, carrying specific limits. When we respect those limits, we can anticipate. When we deny them, we hallucinate. With modeling installed this way, prediction can now be defined cleanly as forward constraint from M to future traces of T, under declared scope, windows, and error bounds. Always, peace be upon you.